This would be a steal for the Orlando Magic. We know this team needs three things in the offseason. That is shooting, shooting, and more shooting. Bleacher Report just offered up 5 different transactions that the Orlando Magic could be a part of to make this roster better for the 2025-26 NBA season. It involves the Nets, the Lakers, and the Dallas Mavericks. We're going to be going over those different moves that were offered up in this article, as well as taking a look at Dalton Knecht and what he could potentially bring to this Orlando Magic basketball roster. And you're going to want to stay to the very end of this video because there's a lot to unpack here, because 5 different moves, all kind of connecting to each other, and that is why I thought that this was such an interesting piece and why I wanted to make a video on it. But guys, as always, I'm your host, Patrick Previty. This is Magic Digest, your one-stop shop for Orlando Magic basketball content here on YouTube. Make sure that you guys subscribe to the channel. The support has been great, and I definitely appreciate it a lot. Okay, so the meat and potatoes of this deal that really caught my eye and had me look a little bit deeper was the second transaction in this 5 transaction piece. It was the Magic receiving Dalton Knecht and some money, and they get in return, or the Nets get in return, Maxi Kleber, Jett Howard, the 27 Boston Celtics second rounder, and the Los Angeles Lakers receive Daniel Gafford. Now, this is dependent upon the first transaction, which is that the Magic received Daniel Gafford, and the Mavericks received Cole Anthony, the number 25 overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft. That is coming from the Denver Nuggets, so the Magic still get to keep their number 16 draft pick that they have here in this draft as well. So, obviously, they need some cash in this deal, so they get $110,000 in cash from the Brooklyn Nets. Now, transaction number 3 and 4, the Magic signed Trent Jr. via the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is the $10 million starting range. The Magic then also get to sign Tyus Jones via the biannual exception, projected at $5.1 million starting salary, and then they move on to transactions 5 and 6, so I guess there is another transaction here, but kind of put those two together. They decline their team option on Mo Wagner, which is at $11 million, and the Magic also declined their team option on Gary Harris at $7.5 million. I don't think there's going to be any movement with the Mo Wagner team option right there. I'd have to look deeper into that, what his injury has to do with that specific scenario and how exactly that would impact whatever the Orlando Magic typically would want to do. But I think that Mo Wagner is definitely going to stay with this team. So if that blows this whole thing up, it blows this whole thing up. But I don't think it does. Okay, now let's take a look at Dalton Knecht before we get into the rest of the meat and potatoes of this deal. Look, this is a player that was traded last season, and it obviously wasn't able to go through because of a physical on the other end of this deal. But he is healthy, 38% three-point shooter. We're looking for upside here. That's why the Orlando Magic would potentially want to do this deal. Look, this is a player that potentially the Lakers are in just a different mode right now. They don't want to have or develop a guy who is young as Dalton Knecht is, and they kind of decided to move him, and he didn't really play a ton, especially in the playoffs. But for the Orlando Magic, I feel like they could definitely use a player like him, and there is upside there. Look, he was the number 17 overall pick in the 2024 draft, and while he was in and out of the lineup last year, he still got plenty of run. He played in 78 games, had that 38% three-point percentage, and he did have a 37-point outing in November against the Utah Jazz. So he made 9 three-pointers in that game, which is a rookie record, and you got to think that there's going to be some overall improvement to his game. Even though he only averaged 9 points last season, he could potentially average 12 to 13 to 14 points, in my opinion, on this Orlando Magic basketball team next season. That could be extremely valuable. Now, what did some of the other parts of this deal look like? As I mentioned, or the reasoning rather look like. As I mentioned, the first transaction to end up making this all happen would be the Orlando Magic receiving Daniel Gafford from the Dallas Mavericks for Cole Anthony in the 25 overall first round pick. This trade would have to obviously be executed before the NBA draft. The remaining 3 would be completed on July 6th, following the league's annual new league year essentially start, where you can contact people. It's like kind of like free agency essentially. Brooklyn would use their cap room to absorb Maxi Kleber and Jett Howard's contracts when we look later on, and that would allow this team to continue to start making some different moves with the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, and then when we're talking about getting Trent, and then potentially getting the biannual exception with Tyus Jones. So Obviously, we'd hate to see Cole Anthony go, but whenever it's connected to all of these different things, we would get Dalton Knecht, Gary Trent Jr., Tyus Jones, all for relatively not a ton. You would only be giving up Cole Anthony, the 25 overall pick in this year's draft, and then you'd have to move around potentially what Mo Wagner is making, and then you would definitely be giving away Gary Harris. I think that is totally something that this Orlando Magic team should be able to do. We know that Gary Trent Jr., he signed this 1-year minimum deal last year with the Milwaukee Bucks, but he played his butt off this past season, and he was pretty good in the playoffs as well. He had 37 points on 11 of 16 shooting in the Game 3 win over the Pacers that the Bucks had, and that is something that I definitely think this team would value a ton. Across the series, he shot 22 of 44 from the three-point range, so he would fill that role again. And Tyus Jones is a name that I threw out in a couple videos ago where, look, he could definitely fit this team as being a rotational point guard. Turns 29 on May 10th, so just in a couple days. So he fits that timeline for what this team is wanting. He's a low turnover, ball handling guard, and he's got a reliable outside shot. He shot 41.4% from deep in each of his last 2 seasons. And unless the Suns dip under the second apron, they can't offer Jones more than 120% of his minimum salary. So the Magic could outbid them by offering him that biannual exception. That's where that comes in. Sorry if that was a little bit all over the place, but the money stuff does make sense. If Gary Trent Jr. were to be somewhere around like 3 years, $30 million, that would be really, really useful for this team, and I definitely think that that's something that they can do. But with all of these connecting moves, they would have to be able to put it together and make the money work, and that is how you would be able to do it. I'm going to link this article down in the description here so you guys can take a look at all of the ins and outs of it, because it is a little bit more complicated as far as the salary cap is concerned. But if you were able to get those 3 guys, I feel like that is a home run type of offseason for this team, and you're not exactly giving up too much, because since you already have that first round pick, your own first round pick, so you have 2 this draft, it's not that valuable. Cole Anthony, obviously you would hate to see him go, but he's a player that wasn't exactly in this rotation during this year as consistently as maybe he had been in years past. Obviously, he was super crucial in December and January, but then was phased out in March and definitely into that playoff series against Boston. And then with Gary Harris, I know that defense is definitely valuable to some Gary Harris truthers out there, but not enough for me to potentially pass up on the ability to get 3 different guys and Dalton Knecht, who I personally am a fan of because I think he's got that upside, especially if he were to come to the Orlando Magic, get a bigger role, and not exactly be inserted into such a high-pressure scenario with a guy like LeBron James or Luka Doncic. I think he could find his way, his game in Orlando. You get that Gary Trent Jr., playoff experience, as well as Tyus Jones, who fits a specific need. And if you're losing a guy like Gary Harris or Cole Anthony, I feel like Tyus Jones can slot in there pretty well. I think we've toyed around with moving Suggs to the 2 in a lot of these comment sections, so that could potentially be something that works out in the future. But I'm going to leave that, like I said, in the description down below so you guys can take a look. But what is also in the description down below is if you're interested in more NBA content, I have another YouTube channel. It's called The Big Little Podcast. You guys can go check that out. We're doing game recaps for every single game in the NBA playoffs for the rest of the way. We make pretty decent evaluations and speculation videos as well, but it's mainly just the meat and potatoes of what is going on in the NBA, which I know a lot of you guys have been asking about in the comment section down below. If you want that from me, it's going to be there on that channel. But I appreciate you guys watching this video, sticking all the way to the very end. And as always, I will see you guys next time with more Orlando Magic basketball content.